Hey guys, it's Jess from Stark Skincare, and welcome once again to whatever my YouTube channel is called. Today we are in the Casa Stark living room with a special guest who isn't a guest because he lives here. This is my husband, Adriano, or Adri as we colloquially call him around these parts. And Adri is technically the co-founder and some other official title. I don't remember what.
I don't even remember. No.
Vice president
CFO.
or CFO?
Yeah.
Something. Whatever at Stark. What do you do at Stark, Adri?
Now, not very much.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So
Accounting.
thanks a lot, Adri. No, but we are here today because there's a topic that I have talked about in some of my green beauty circles before that I think is really interesting and I think is really important as a green beauty consumer or enthusiast to keep in mind. Now, what we're going to be talking about, it isn't like, don't take this as fact necessarily. And that's kind of actually what we're going to be talking about is
right.
Facts or lack thereof.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so what we're going to be talking about with Adri and why I chose Adri to do this, not just because he's conveniently always around, but also because Adri has his PhD in computational biomedical physics. Did I get that right?
Computational physics.
Computational physics at McGill University in Montreal. So he is our resident scientist and fact man. I don't know. And so he's sort of my reality checker. So when I'm like, oh no, Adri, scientists say this, look at this, look at these articles, look at this. And he's like, whoa, let's take it back a step. Let's actually make sure that this checks through.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So one big thing in green beauty, as you probably know, is that a lot of the marketing, a lot of the sort of fire behind it is fear-mongering. So it's the fear of the chemicals in conventional products. It's the fear of, all of these anti-health claims that a lot of these green companies, Stark included, we've definitely done this and sometimes still do because of course we do believe in natural ingredients, but that's just like, you're going to choose the salad or the donut. Obviously the donut. No, the salad, because it's healthier for you. But there's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of misinformation going around. So that's kind of what we're going to be. That was like the longest intro ever.
That's fine. Okay.
So one of the issues that green beauty consumers have is that they want more proof. They always want more proof. They want to know that this is going to do this. No, sorry, you're going to get to talk in a second. But this is just the reality of our marriage. Feels like we're in therapy now. No, one of the realities of owning a green beauty company is that you're not actually allowed, like the FDA and Health Canada won't actually allow you to make a lot of claims unless you're a cosmeceutical, which isn't even a real word. Like a medical aesthetic company, then you can actually make medical claims. But if you're just a skincare company, then you can't say this is going to reverse signs of aging. I think there's only 2 products that are allowed to say this will reverse or I guess prevent the signs of aging, and that's SPF and retinol. Anyways, so there's a lot of things you can't say technically because the scientists, they won't allow you. So let's talk about scientific evidence, scientific data as like a marketing strategy.
Okay. So
I'm not sure what to ask you exactly.
Well, when we were doing the notes and talking about this beforehand, you had the 2 points about the FDA and the claims, the medical benefit claims, but you also had the point about the fear mongering and chemical, all that, traditional cosmetics and skincare are evil and all that, that aspect of it.
Right.
What is it like in your experience in forums and customers, and like what is that like when people are confronted with these claims that make them afraid of it?
It's very daunting. There's a lot of information out there for consumers. I think it's great if someone is making the switch from going from conventional to green, because green beauty does have a ton of benefits. It's a very nutritional way of feeding your skin as opposed to mineral oil. But there is a lot of misinformation about, I mean, if you just ignore like conventional skincare because there's a lot of proof, or there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of gray zones with conventional, but just with green beauty, with particular ingredients, that it's very hard to sort of get to the scientific facts about ingredients. So that I think is like sort of the thing to talk about.
So one thing that when I notice people talking about science sometimes do is they use the words like proof and facts, where I mean a fact is something that's just been proven many times, but I used the word proof just now.
It's hard not to.
Yeah, no, I know, but that's the thing. That for me, a proof is a mathematical proof. Like it's a logical thing. Like if A, then B, and all that, you just follow the chain of reasoning and you come to a conclusion that's absolutely true, right? And very little of science can give that amount of support to anything, right? And so when people ask for proofs about certain things, it's I think putting too much of an expectation on how clear-cut something can be, especially on the time scales of how long these things have been studied.
Right. So sometimes, I mean, like if it's one paper that was published by like, 3 dudes at whatever university, dudes or dudettes, that's not proof.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Right. And so there's a lot of reasons why the things that are chosen to be studied are affected by different biases that people have in the scientists involved. There's also, so there's a big chain of biases that kind of before the evidence that you read about gets to you, right? And that's also something to take into account.
So what are some of the biases?
Well, at the stage of choosing what to research, there's subtle biases towards certain areas over others. And it's not always easy, because I don't know necessarily in your fields what those biases would be, but I know that in every field that I've looked at, including the ones I've studied, there's always certain areas that are more acceptable to study in and certain areas that are not. And
what do you mean by acceptable?
Well, just there's a whole process of acquiring funds in order to do research, right? And to do that, you need to, like, there's a bit of marketing in that aspect as well. Like, essentially, there's areas of science where buzzwords are used in order to get funding, and it's a marketing thing in a sense. Like, you have to market the research that you want to do based on more and more these days, based on like near-term benefits to people and trends and buzzwords and that kind of stuff.
Do you think there's like a trickle down or a trickle up effect in terms of like what the popular like buzzwords on the street are or whatever?
It's a cycle. Okay. I mean, like the more that certain fields are seen to be producing results, the easier it is to get funding for that field.
Okay. Right? So let's just take like coconut oil as an example. Yeah. Now we're not going to talk about any specific coconut oil studies or whatever, because we haven't just brushed up on that today. But coconut oil was like the thing, right? Like I don't know, 4 years, I don't really remember, whatever it was, 3 years ago, let's say, and everyone was doing everything with coconut oil. Yeah. So do you think, and I mean, there's doctors that have written books about coconut oil. There's the coconut oil cure. There's, a lot of products, skincare products, health products, all based on coconut oil. Do you think that it's the studies that created the trend, or the trend that created the studies? Or like, as you were saying, it's kind of a...
Yeah, it's a bit of a cycle. And I think... So I've only talked about the biases in choosing what to study, but there's a whole chain, like it's a chain of biases. So like when people choose what to study, there's a bias, and people who grant funds, there's biases there as well. Right. And I don't mean bias to mean that like anything intentional or negative. It's just a human thing that we are going to be biased towards things we already believe, things we already expert at studying.
Right.
So
it's like how you Google something. You always, you never Google like a disproving fact, like the terms that you use.
Yeah.
Like you'll be like, you know, if you're afraid that coconut oil is comedogenic, you'll be like, is coconut oil comedogenic? And you'll find all the papers or all of the articles and blog posts and memes about blog oil. Coconut oil being comedogenic, as opposed to using a different Google search term. So it's true. It's just like.
But that is the same. That's true when you're doing research more in depth as well. I mean, the thing is that like when you're approaching any subject that's complex, which is most subjects of interest, you can do that same thing. So when you're doing literature review for your own studies, right, you have some idea of what you want to look at and what you expect to find. And no matter how pure you want to be, it takes a lot of skill to remove yourself from that and actually be able to make those searches and be unbiased when it comes to reviewing what's already been produced, even when you're doing like in-depth research.
And you have to also remember that when someone is doing research for a paper, they're not alone.
Yeah.
So they're usually under their supervisor, and their supervisor is going to have certain biases and certain like, no, because these guys are funding me for this, and you kind of got to. There's a lot of politics.
Yeah.
That I remember when you were writing your paper, like.
No, I was very lucky with my supervisor.
You were. Like, but the process. Like I just remember the whole.
Yeah, and I've heard horror stories from many of my co-graduate students where it's not as free as it could be and should be. Yeah. Like there used to be a time when universities were like the pinnacle of intellectual freedom, where it'd be a place where you were safe to, do long-term thinking, pure science, and study things for their own sake, and you're free from fear of persecution based on your ideas and all that. It used to be that, and now it's more and more becoming a place where those long-held ideas are hard to question.
Right.
And I don't want to make it sound like it's, conspiracy or evil. It's just a very rigid format for something that's been evolving very rapidly. Like the amount of science that's produced is beyond what we can imagine, and it continues to grow really quickly.
Right.
But our institutions are no different than they were in the 1800s.
Right.
And that's a problem.
And also the problem now is how quickly information goes from paper to consumer.
Right. And so that's more of where those filters come in, because it's not only how quickly, but it's the speed at which that information travels depends not on how true it is, but how exciting and sensational and buzzworthy it is.
Yeah.
And at each step, so a person publishes a paper, right? So before that, there's some biases, but a person publishes a paper, and there's university press departments who go through the research produced in their departments, and they pick the ones that are interesting. And that's a cycle of marketing to like show off the research that's being done, and it helps in a way, because when you're evaluating where to study, you see what research is being done, but there is an element of which of these is the most newsworthy, captivating, right? And that just keeps going. At every step that happens, you just get more and more focused on the things that are most sensational, and not necessarily on the things that are most true or the most well studied. Or even just the ones that say that what we've believed is true, what we've already believed is true. It's always things that overturn beliefs, things that are like breakthroughs.
Yeah.
So
because it's newsworthy.
It's
interesting.
And
it's not like, wow, what you already knew, still true.
Right. And that's another actually more important bias, I think, that scientists choose. It's very hard to do studies that are reproducing results that have already been done. Not hard, it's just that it's not, it's difficult to get those papers published, and people are just not interested in doing those papers. It's just like, oh, whatever somebody else did, let me do it again to make sure that it's actually reproduced, that it's actually true. Right. So those. Yeah.
Who wants to do that? Who wants to be like?
I know, but it's a critical function of science. But nobody wants
no one wants to do it, because who wants to be like the guy, like the man or the woman who's like, just saying like, oh, that other guy was still right.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
That fact's still true.
Yeah.
And then another problem specifically with green beauty, with the health industry, the natural health industry, is that there's no funding for individual ingredients.
Right.
Like, there's not really any money for
natural ingredients.
Natural ingredients.
Yeah.
Like, there's no like shea butter coalition or whatever. Like, or maybe there is, but there's not a lot of funding and there's not a lot of pressure to be writing those papers.
Yeah. Right.
So if anyone's writing a PhD, help us out. Yeah, so then let's talk about, okay, so that's kind of that's the bias of how papers are chosen and written.
Yeah,
so
and all the way down to this news stories that people pick up on.
What gets picked up,
yeah.
Exactly. So like every like meme, basically, that you get saying coconut oil has this benefit, and it's not that it's necessarily untrue, it's just that that's a very lasered focus on some of the things, whether it's negative or positive.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And we can tell how wary we need to be, because we know that, like you said, one thing is all the rage, and then the next thing it's it's awful and it gives you all kinds of
which is so
deformities.
Confusing to
right. It's confusing when
consumer.
Right, when you
the confuser.
It's because claims seem to fluctuate. Right, it's good for you, it's bad for you, it's good for you. So people are trying to figure out the truth, and I do think that they are working towards the truth, but on the timescales that it takes are different than the timescales of the news cycle.
Right.
Right. So it might take 15, 20 years to really figure out the benefits or hazards of a particular oil. Right. Whereas in that time frame, you've already had ups and downs both ways. 10, 15 times. And that's it. It makes it difficult to know what's true based on
right. So then how can people make decisions about these things?
Right. So for one thing I want to say is that there's a lot of fear around these things, and one thing to keep in mind that I think is very important is that the reason that certain things flip back and forth, or certain things are very hotly debated on one side and the other, is that it's difficult to determine. So the effect is very small. And that I think is an important point, because...
Say that again.
Okay.
No, just that the effect is very small.
The effect is very small.
Yeah.
So the reason that there's claims on both sides is because the effect is small. So if something was absolutely awful for you, right, then very quickly people would figure that out.
Yeah.
And that would just become known, and it wouldn't flip-flop, and it would just be, it's awful for you, it's clear, there's no way around it, right?
Yeah.
And same for the other side, if it's absolutely beneficial for you, it'll be clear that that's the case.
Yeah.
There's a whole gray area where it's not really clear, and studies need to be much bigger, studies need to be done more thoroughly in different ways. And the important point about that is that if it's not clear, that means the effect is small.
Yeah.
Whereas for certain things like stress and fear and the primal response of, panic about,
the effects of cortisol on the body.
all of that is known to be absolutely detrimental to your health. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
And so what I find frustrating about watching these fear-mongering tactics is that you are trying to kind of co-opt people's self-interest and wanting to be healthy.
And their survival instinct.
Survival instinct, right. In order to get them to buy certain things. When the act of doing that, you're actually making them unhealthy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like that, but yeah. Yeah, and that's, we should discuss that a little bit, because that is, this is the beef right now.
Yeah.
In green beauty, I think for a lot of us, is how much marketing companies, PR companies, cosmetics and the cosmetic industry, and I mean this for the green and the conventional guys, because honestly I feel like we can just lump them all together now. One reason why I didn't want to have anything to do with conventional cosmetics was because of the way that they marketed it. It made me sick to my stomach how much it made us as women feel just completely, it just devalued us so much and just make us feel like worthless sacks of garbage. But green beauty, it's just making us feel like worthless sacks of garbage, because we feel like we're always having to keep up with what the healthiest choices are. Yeah. And the thing is that there is no healthiest choice.
Right.
That's getting into perfectionism. That's finding the ultimate oil, the ultimate vitamin or nutrient or ceramide or whatever, and it's the stress behind that. And even if you think, oh, it's exciting and I like the pursuit or whatever, no, it's stress. It's stressful. And that has horrible effects on the body. Horrible effects on the body. Raised cortisol levels, that's what's giving you acne. That's what's causing premature age. I mean, this is just like in the skin side of things. Premature aging. It's shortening your telomeres. Telomeres, is that how you pronounce it? Or telomeres? Telomeres. Which is shortening the life of your cells. So killing you. Like,
talk about fear-mongering.
Talk about fear-mongering. No, I'm sorry. But it's true. Like, so basically, we all need to chill.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah.
We really do. We really, really do. Yeah. And, you know, I think that...
But we can empathize because of the perfectionism that we
struggle
with.
Yeah.
Because it's like...
We love talking about perfectionism. We love it.
Yeah. And not the high standards, like the actual toxic perfectionism that paralyzes.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but that's a form of that, right? Like
it absolutely is. Yeah, because it's marketing. It's both of those marketing tactics, the you're not beautiful enough and the you're not making healthy enough choices, is both preying on perfectionism.
Yeah.
Right. Is there something wrong?
No,
right?
I'm just checking.
Okay. It's both preying on perfectionism.
Yeah.
You know, and so many, and it's an ism. Like, this isn't like I'm such a perfectionist, haha, it's a great thing. No, it's awful. Like, it's a bad thing, but we're conditioned.
It means never being good enough.
It means never being good enough, and we're conditioned to think that being a perfectionist is a good thing, but like, oh, we could go on like a week-long rant about how much perfectionism has like messed both of us up, and we're definitely recovering perfectionists, and it's been like this years-long path for us. Definitely another subject though, but yeah, that's exactly what it's preying on. It's like I think I've said this before. It's a marketing tactic disguised. That sounds weird to me. No. Disguised as advice, as like helpful advice, but it's not. It's fear-mongering, and it's fear-mongering with science behind it, and people. Especially I think if you're not a scientist, or I don't know, like I'm not a scientist, so maybe you'll have to speak for the scientist side of it, but people do not want to like touch that. It's like someone like, you know, like Dr. Ferrari said that, like Dr. whoever this is, boom, you know, and there's sometimes a little bit of debate, but you're always like countering one scientist with another.
Yeah.
And you know, so talk about that.
Well, I think we could also talk a little bit about what to do.
Yeah, I think we should be talking about that. So what do we do?
Well, relax. I think you just relax.
Relax.
There's something to be said about the intention behind trying to find healthier choices, right? But just always remember that it's a journey, and that we are lucky. We are absolutely lucky in the state we're in, how small the effects that we're dealing with are.
Yeah.
Right?
It's such a privilege to be able to make these stressful choices.
Right, because I mean we are choosing like at most like the sliver of a percentage of making things a little better here, a little better there in over
it's
the,
not
the
like,
course
should
of our
I
entire
step on this landmine or not?
Right, yeah, or like more like when we're talking about health, like diseases and infectious diseases that we've you know for you know most of human history we've died from are now non-existent. Right, we have the luxury to be choosing things freely, and we just need to remember that we are beyond the point of survival with most of these things. Right, we're not choosing, you know, something will kill us, something will make us live, you know, twice as long. It's really small effects at this point. For most things. I mean, there are obvious things like that, you know, smoking or things like that where we know it's harmful. Sun exposure, right? Which, okay.
He's from the Middle East, like he's from the desert, so he's just like...
I grew up in the desert.
Grew up in the desert, so like
I love the sun.
Loves basking in the sun, and you have like Latin descent, so you're just like a sun.
I like it. Yeah.
He's a lizard. You're not a lizard.
No. That
was distracting. I'm sorry. What?
What were we saying? Yeah,
that we're privileged to
we're
be able
privileged,
to have that
right?
choice.
So in order to what to do about it, just take things that come from this, scientific proof with a grain of salt, because it's very difficult to determine with certainty something is or is not very beneficial for you.
Like Adri said, like there's no such thing really as proof unless it's mathematical. I mean, he's from a physics background, right? So and there is no proof. There are no facts. And what I tell my customers a lot is just to listen, like for example, to listen to their skin, to trust themselves. If you know that, I'm really like using coconut today, but like if you know that coconut doesn't work for your skin, if you know that if you eat coconut and you feel awful or whatever, then just avoid coconut.
That's another good point, is that science is trying to come up with general statements that are true in most cases, right? But when you're making these decisions, what really matters is what's true for you in your instance, right? And it might be true that, like coconut oil is like the healthiest thing in the world, right? But for you, it just doesn't work. And you need to know that. And that's your own science that actually you're doing there.
Do your own science.
No, but seriously, because it's like, that's what matters in the end.
And I think that's actually a really good point. It's kind of like, okay, so Tim Ferriss is someone who we've followed for many years, and he's like his own lab. He's like the one-man lab. He's always conducting experiments on himself constantly. Now, I don't mean that you should put like toilet cleaner on your face and see if that works for you. Little common sense. But it is worth to experiment within reason. On yourself to know what works for you, not what works for your cousin, what works for me, what works for another blogger, what works for this guy, like whoever. Like it's really about finding out what's true for you and sticking with that.
True-ish. Like
true-ish.
Don't
That's true.
get too far with that either, because I mean, like, what
No, you're right about that too.
You don't need to be, because then you can be stressful about like A/B testing your face and like like all kinds of stuff. No, just we underestimate sometimes how powerful our brain is at detecting patterns, right? And if you're just
lazy.
It's lazy, and that's how it's able to find patterns in many different things. And but the thing is that that's something that we can use if we are aware of what's, like, if we give it a feedback, right? So if you put something on your skin and then you just go about your day and you don't like try to feel what it's like, try to get a sense of, like, just put awareness there, then you can't pick up the patterns. But if you do so regularly enough, you don't have to consciously have this like fact, like, oh, this certain thing is good for me or not, and know that with any level of certainty. But coming from a very logical person, that might seem weird, but I believe that intuition is very important in that
if
realm.
He says it's true, it's true.
No, there's no truth. There's no truth. No, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? So that as long as you're listening to your skin, as you often say, right? You will eventually pick up patterns, whether you realize it or not. And that's your own, that you should trust that.
Yeah.
Right?
I really feel like if someone connects with the idea of something, often, like, it's just like a little gut feeling, that's often a really good sign that it is for you.
Right.
Which is why I put a lot of effort into my copyright. I'm not trying to come back to marketing, but it's, like, I'm trying to, because I'm not an esthetician, you don't get to come into like my spa and experience it firsthand. I try to give sort of the esoteric experience of it. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's like, I really feel like if someone is connecting with it, that's a really good sign that it really is for you. It's like a lot of people, they decide to become vegan because they have a feeling, or they drop their veganism, they become paleo, or they don't give themselves a label. They just do whatever. It's from a feeling and it feels right. Or someone decides to become a runner or whatever. It's like, like your body is really intelligent.
Yeah. So with that, it's important that the source of information is yourself, right? Because if you're making choices and your awareness is on what other people are doing, what other people are saying, what you should do, what other people say is good for you or not good for you, right? Then you are tailoring your experience to what is expected of you, right? But if you're, you know what I mean?
Say that again?
that you could feel that you want to be a vegan or a vegan, all these things because, and that feeling could be like, oh, I should be doing this thing.
Oh,
and a
right,
negative
right.
thing.
Yeah.
Or it could be like, it just seems like something that would be healthy for me.
Right. Yeah. I think the should, that was like sort of the key.
Yeah.
If it comes from like I should be, like I get that sometimes like in emails, or from people wanting to switch up their skincare routine. They'll be like, oh, I know that I should be using oils. And if it was when it is face to face, like you can see it in their body language, in their face, that they're like, I know I should be.
Yeah.
They're kind of apologetic, and like their body language changes. It's like, well, you don't seem into it. Maybe you shouldn't be, actually.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so if it comes from a should, then it's not, then you shouldn't. But if it's just like this inspires me, like it kind of lights you up.
Yeah.
I think is a good way to.
If it's based on your past experiences. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's from your past experience and the opportunity presents itself, whatever it may be, and you're just like, oh,
yeah,
that feels right. Something about that seems right.
Right.
Not like a fact or anything.
Okay. So
you have no proof.
Yeah,
but
no proof. Do you want to recap maybe like what's some of the...
Okay, so is science proof?
Okay. I mean, it moves towards truth, and it moves towards truth slower than people sometimes expect it to in certain areas, especially for gray areas, for small effects.
Okay.
Right? And keep that in mind.
Science as it presents itself on a Facebook feed
that's most likely not science. Right? I mean, like, it's just levels and levels and levels of sensationalization to where the point where the more impactful and scary or sensational message spreads, and that's not necessarily the most true.
Okay. Not necessarily the most true.
The most true, right.
So science in marketing?
There's science, there's a marketing aspect to science the way it's done. Marketing would be a strong word, but you know what, there's human choices that are independent of the way the universe works and trying to find the truth. Okay, so like there's science is done by humans, right?
Yeah.
That's something to keep in mind.
Until the robots take over.
Yeah, I suppose.
And fear-mongering?
Yeah, well, just know that the fear-mongering itself is more damaging than anything they're trying to make you afraid of. At this point, like at this point in history, whatever effects you're talking about are most likely very small, but stress, fear, panic responses, those are known to be negative. So keep that in mind when you see these things, and just make the decision from a place away from that, I suppose.
And it's so sad because it's like, you know, marketing firms, all these companies, they know we're just poor little cavemen deep down, and we're just so afraid of the lions coming to attack us, and we're just so ready to get stressed. Yeah. We're like primed to get stressed about something. Yeah. But remember that being stressed about like which oil to choose, total place of privilege. Like, like let's keep that in check. Yeah. Closing sentiment here, closing remarks.
No, I think we summed it up pretty well. I mean, we can always answer questions if people want to hear more about this.
Yeah, ask us questions.
Yeah.
So this is Adriano, you guys. If you enjoyed his lovely presence, let us know. I'd love to convince him to come back. Well, I mean, he's here all the time. To the YouTube. Thanks for joining us. I hope that was interesting, and see you next time. Bye.